What is the difference between a medium roast versus a dark roast coffee? I'm Phil, the Barista Coffee Dude with BaristaCoffeeLife.com. And today I'm going to try and answer that same question. Now, when I first started out in coffee, and even still today, this is a really common question where people ask, do you have any light roasts? My stomach doesn't do well with light roasts. Hey, what's a good solid medium roast? Hey, what's the darkest roast you have? So it's still a really prominent question, but what is the actual definition? So I turn to the Google, because where else do you turn when you have a question? Okay, a medium roast coffee. Source number one, 11 minutes between 440, 435 degrees, 5 minutes post first crack. So a first crack typically happens around the 8-9 minute mark. So 5 minutes post first crack, you're looking at about a 13-minute roast between 400 and 435 degrees. Okay, resource number two. A medium roast coffee should take only 5 minutes. But source number one said 5 minutes post first crack. Source number two says it should only take 5 minutes. All right, so I looked up a third source. A medium roast coffee should take 14 to 16 minutes. All right, source number four. Medium roast coffee between 400 and 430 degrees. Well, source number one was up to 435 degrees, but now 430 degrees. All right, source number five. A medium roast coffee should be between 15 and 30 minutes, 30 minutes. That's a long time. Okay, well, now that we answered what a medium roast coffee is, let's go to what is a dark roast coffee. All right, source number one, a dark roast coffee, 12 to 15 minutes to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep in mind the melting point of caffeine is essentially 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So apparently a dark roast coffee is when you are melting caffeine. Okay. Source number two, a dark roast coffee is an Agtron scale of 0 to 30. Cool, glad we could clear that up. Dark roast coffee between 400 and 430 degrees Fahrenheit. Even though a medium roast coffee apparently is 400 to 435 degrees. Okay, so to really understand the difference between a medium roast coffee versus a dark roast coffee, and even what is a light roast coffee, throw that in there too, to get back to the basics of understanding the nuances of roasting coffee, you have to look at what is roasting in the first place. Roasting is a cooking method using dry heat. A dry heat cooking method uses ambient thermodynamic energy and air to warm your food product and then bring it up to a certain temperature, and then we call it done. So that doneness within the coffee bean, temperature-wise, is how we gauge if it's a light, a medium, or a dark. So essentially, with the cooking method, any cooking method, particularly roasting coffee, what we are doing is we're actually manipulating the taste substances that we perceive, like that neurogastronomy is being manipulated. So we perceive something as bitter or sweet or acidic or whatever we want to say it is, stone fruit or blah, blah, blah. So during a roasting process, molecules will interact, compounds like, and I'm not a chemist, but I understand chemistry 101 from college. You have compounds, which are like sets of molecules combined together. Compounds will either decompose or like break apart, or they will synthesize and compounds will merge. So one of those, or two of those really important food molecular things that's going on, you have caramelization and you have the Maillard reaction. So caramelization and the Maillard reaction are oftentimes very confused, and they are used interchangeably during the coffee roasting process. Caramelization and the Maillard reaction do happen simultaneously for quite a bit of duration of the roasting process. Caramelization is sugars interacting with sugars. The Maillard reaction is sugars interacting with amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of protein. Yes, coffee does have amino acids like protein structures within it. So caramelization lends itself to sweetness. The Maillard reaction also lends itself to sweetness. Furthermore, it lends itself to a lot of the complexity that we taste in coffee. When roasters look at a flavor profile, and when they're like trying to project an interpretation of a bean, they have to consider the sugars in the actual bean itself, and like the altitude, the hardness of the beans, and their machinery. Like roasting on this Quest M3 is going to be light years different than if I'm roasting on like a 15 kilo Probat or a Diedrich or a Loring or like whatever I'm roasting on. That setup is going to determine in large part how I am approaching that roast. So the coffee itself, like sugar content, like a natural Brazil or a honey processed Costa Rica, something high in sugar content, fast forward 7 minutes through the roast, you're going to have a lot of caramelization. You're going to have a lot of material available for the Maillard reaction because of the makeup of that particular bean. Whereas if you're using something else like a wet, like a washed or wet processed type coffee, where a lot of that sugar is enzymatically eaten away by bacteria and enzymes and so forth, less sugar content, less caramelization, less Maillard reaction, blah, blah, blah. So as a roaster, from that standpoint, you have to think, okay, what taste am I going for? What bean am I working with? What machinery do I have? What's the venting? All of these variations impact how the bean itself cooks, how I want to express the nuances of that bean. Shoot, even like same roaster, same equipment, exact same equipment in San Diego, which is at sea level, versus Denver, which is a mile up in the atmosphere. Same roast profile is not going to work in both locations, meaning a light roast and a medium roast and a dark roast are all going to have variations, even depending on like elevation and geographic location throughout the world. It's crazy and it's pretty mind-blowing. So a better way to look at it, instead of thinking time and temperature of what's a light roast, what's a medium roast, what's a dark roast, and then setting a particular like Agtron reading, which I think is way more accurate than time and temperature, but still, like an Agtron reading tells you the color. It doesn't necessarily mean if the bean was baked, and it might taste dark, but have like a medium Agtron reading. You know what I'm saying? Like there's so many variations to take into account. So personally, Phil the Barista, coffee dude, that's me. My opinion is you have to look more at the characteristics of the coffee. So like, is it brownish or is it dark brown or is it blackish? I mean, that can kind of like tell you just eyesight. You don't need an Agtron reader to tell you that. Is there oil immediately after the roast? If there's oil, then obviously is a darker roast or a longer roast, or you don't know what you're doing as a roaster. But assuming it was intentional, if there's oil on the surface of the bean directly after roast or within a day or two, more than likely it's like starting to get on the dark side. A little bit of oil in other parts of the world would be considered like a medium roast, unless it's like charred black and all that. Like maybe you're in Louisiana and like you really like super dark chicory infused coffee. I mean, culture. Okay, so like look at the bean. What's it look like? Is it puffed out? Is the surface of it smooth? Are oil showing? All of those can be indicators of like, if it's still ripply, it's probably still like more in the medium realm, personally. So when you brew it, does it taste bitter? Does it like brew differently? Do you have to dial back the water temperature, like lower the water temperature because you keep over extracting? If those are things that you're having to do during the brewing process, that's like indicative of a darker roast. Uh, does the coffee just kind of naturally want to over extract and taste heavy? Does the body, is it like super weighty? Or does it still have like a twinge of acidity and a nice balance of acids and bitters and like acids and sugars, like acid and sweet? Because those acids, a lot of those burn off once you start getting into that medium roast realm. So if it's like making your stomach gurgle, still has some acidity, you're probably more like light to medium roast. So like this is one of the kind of the science versus the art of roasting coffee, and what really makes coffee unique from a customer standpoint, from a barista standpoint, from a roaster standpoint, shoot, even like from an importing standpoint and all that. There's all these variations, and there's no like hard and fast rule, but physics and thermodynamics don't change. During roasting, you're still getting heat transfer, you're still getting airflow. You still have to worry about like your rate of rise, when's first crack, and then like how far after like post first crack did the roast go, and like all of these dynamics of roasting. That's where kind of like the art comes in on roasting, and that's where different roasters, like human roasters, can express themselves. And that's why you can get such a large variation of what's a light roast, a medium roast versus a dark roast, because so much of it is subjective. And a lot of that is super frustrating, especially like OCD folks who are like, tell me this is medium, please. I just need a medium roast. And it's like, for me, it's medium, but for that guy over there, I mean, this is too light for him. And he's like telling me this is dark. I'm like, dude, I don't know. This debate of like what's a light roast versus what's a medium roast versus what's a dark roast, to me, like it reminds me so much of a Tootsie Pop. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? The world may never know. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do the things. Appreciate you guys. And this channel, as always, is on a mission to connect people and fuel dreams through coffee. Peace out.